I'm a multiple six-figure Etsy seller from Europe, and when I started, I know that VAT was something that felt really hard and kind of overwhelming. So in this video, I'll break down what VAT is, how it works, why it's actually one of the biggest benefits in a business, and some actionable steps that you can take to make sure that everything's set up correct. Now, a disclaimer. I'm not a tax professional nor an accountant, so I would strongly recommend that you talk to a tax professional in order to make sure that everything is correct for you. So, what is VAT? VAT stands for Value Added Tax, and it's a general tax that's applied to all commercial activities. To put in simple terms, it's basically, if you buy, for instance, groceries, you pay $20 for the groceries, some of that price will be VAT. What's most important to know here is that an end consumer buys something, then they pay VAT. However, if you are a business, you do not pay VAT. So when we set up our businesses, we usually have the option to apply for VAT. If you do that, at the end of it, you get an VAT ID. And that ID is what we use when we, for instance, work with Etsy. We give them our VAT ID so that we can signal to them that they should not apply VAT on top of their invoices and their Etsy fees. And it's also the thing that we use in order to be able to reclaim our VAT that we have already paid for. So how does this work? In practice, you actually pay the VAT up front. So let's say that you buy a computer for $200. Then you actually pay $250 because you also pay for the VAT. However, you actually get to reclaim that $50 since you are registered for VAT. That's how it works when you buy stuff in the country that you live in. However, since we are living in the EU and working with another country in the EU, it works slightly differently. So when we live in the EU and we work with Etsy, we actually work with their subsidiary, which is Etsy in Ireland. And Ireland is in the EU, so how it works when you work with another EU country, you actually have the option to provide them with your taxpayer ID, which is your VAT ID. And if you have done that, they should not add VAT on top of your fees or any invoices or anything like that, because you are actually subject to something called a reverse charge. Even though we haven't actually paid for VAT now, because of the reverse charge, we are actually supposed to account for it. Reverse charge is just a fancy term for saying that you are responsible for accounting for it. So how it works is when you do your accounting, you basically add an imaginary VAT as if it were there, even though it was not. As I mentioned earlier, it's actually an option to register for VAT. So if we don't want to, we can actually skip it. However, it's important to know that after a certain amount of revenue each year in the shop, you actually need to register for VAT, and then it's not an option anymore. This can differ from country to country, so I'm not gonna go into any specifics, but it's just important to know that after a certain bracket, you will need to register for it. Why do I think that VAT is one of the biggest benefits in a business? Well, it's basically because if we buy something for our business, we can basically save 25% of that stuff. If we buy software, if we buy services, if we buy any other product basically that is directly correlated to the business, we can get 25% off of the price since we don't pay for VAT. It's a huge advantage to have, and you can only do that if you are registered with a VAT ID. And here's the kicker. If we don't register for VAT, the customer on Etsy will still pay for VAT. That's the biggest thing here. So let's say that you put up an item for $20. Etsy will automatically add VAT depending on where they live. So if they live like me in Sweden, they will still, let's say that they buy a mug, they will still add 25% on top of your sales price. Because when you sell something on Etsy, they still deduct and remit the VAT to the relevant tax authority in where the item is being shipped to. So if they buy a mug and for $20, then they will pay $25, and then when it has been sold, Etsy will automatically deduct the $5 and remit that to Sweden's tax authority. So what happens here when it comes to the VAT is that if we don't apply for VAT and we don't have a VAT ID, on all the fees that we get from Etsy, then we will basically have to pay 25% extra. Just for context, I paid about 50,500 or something like that in Etsy ads in the past year. I would have to pay about like $12,000 to $13,000 extra just because I didn't have the tax ID. That's $12,000 to $13,000 in profit I could have had just because I was registered for VAT. What's worth noting here is that if you get an accountant, that's even cheaper than that. And it's also only the Etsy ads fees. I haven't even taken into account the transaction fees and the processing fees. So all of those fees would have a 25% extra cost. So that's why I think not having a VAT, especially when doing Etsy, makes you strangle for profit. An important note about this too is that when we sell our services to another EU country VAT free, because when we sell our stuff on Etsy, we actually sell our services to Etsy in Ireland. We actually have to report how much revenue we have made each quarter to the tax institution. And that's just because we are selling our services VAT free. I forgot to add this in the video, but in order to reclaim already paid VAT, we actually fill out VAT reports and send them in quarterly as well. When the report has been sent, we actually get back the VAT that we have already paid for. And both the periodic report and the VAT report is usually pretty simple and straightforward. Some actionable steps. So what we can do is that when we set up our businesses, we can actually make sure that we apply for a VAT ID from the start. That's also something that I think makes it so much easier to make this whole business work. Otherwise, we kind of get strangled for profit. But it comes with the caveat of a little bit extra work since you have to report each quarter to the tax institution. Alright, so we just went through what VAT is, how it works, why it's actually one of the biggest benefits in a business, and some actionable steps that you can take to make sure that you're set up correct. I hope this video gave some clarity on it, and if there's anything that you'd like me to cover next, please comment down below and I'll do my best to help out. I'll see you in the next one.